Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The ladder wars may be finished, but the action still has a lot to go over as we have another best of three matchup between RTK Killing Smalls and GGX Wenin. We'll be having Killing Smalls on the Wood Elves, and he'll be facing off against Wenin's Greenskins in the first match here. So for the Wood Elf army, it is going to be triple Way Watchers, going to be sitting up in the front, one of which is the Hawkeyes of Drakira, with their Discouraged and their Smoke Bombs to boot on top of the regular variant. Some Glade Riders are going to be hitting that front line with 4 units of those, and in reserve we do have a bunch of Dryads, one of which is the Race of the Frozen Heart with their Frostbite, going to be sitting back in reserve for these Way Watchers to dive right back behind. For the Lord and Hero, we do have a Glade Lord. Glade Lord is going to be bringing the Prey of Anathrema and Arrow of Kurnos. And then for the spellcasting, we do have a Branch Wraith going to be sitting here with the rest of her Dryads, as she does have, looks like we have Earthblood, and on top of that we have the Pendulum to boot for some nice additional damage. And then there is just a couple of Eternal Guard off into the back, considering they're the only 2 units here that it could not Vanguard forward. But for the Greenskins who they'll be facing, we did have a couple of Goblin Wolf Riders, one of which is actually the Moon Howlers, the ROR variant, and those guys do have Fear. For the rest of the Greenskin army, it is going to be some Goblins, we have some Stone Trolls, and then a variety of infantry, as we have some Orc Boys, some Savage Orcs kind of mixed in from that front line. We do have some more Goblin Wolf Rider Archers, Force Gun Spider Riders, kind of the standard stuff what you can be expecting to see, and the Morgums Mangy Marauders for a little bit of extra armor piercing. For the Lord and Heroes, we do have Grom the Paunch going to be sitting on his chariot. He does have all 3 of his important items that you'll be seeing him with the Lucky Banner. We have the Great Un is here, and Language of Du Bois. For the spellcasting, we do have an Orc Shaman for the spell Slinging of the Greenskins with Here We Go, giving plus 40 melee attack, and Fist of Gork giving magic damage plus 24 melee attack and melee defense will help definitely against those Dryads, and then a Scroll of Shielding. For the rest of the army, it's just some more cavalry with those Orc Boy Biggins, some Force Gun Spider Riders, and that will just kind of wrap things up on there. But most of the action is going to be on the far reaches of the map, so we'll get swinging back that direction, as the Wood Elves are going to be kind of falling back on this very large map, kind of away from the bulk of the Greenskin army, as they're going to be kind of looking to isolate and deal with these Moon Howlers and these Goblin Wolf Riders before the rest of the Greenskins are going to be able to really assist them. And right now, the Glade Lord is the only thing that's really going to be able to catch and do any damage. Is able to drop one of those Moon Howlers with her shots, and you can just kind of see that line of Moon Howlers just slowly stretching down the line as she gets one shot after another. But the Way Watchers are going to be getting some decent shots now in to the front line of the Greenskins, and the Savage Orcs and those Stone Trolls going to be taking quite a bit of damage. Just those a couple initial volleys, especially with that Discouraged against those Stone Trolls, you can just see that leadership had dropped a considerable amount, so it's not going to take too much to really push those guys off to rout off those volleys. And a brutal volley there, as you can just see those Savage Orcs just melting under that pressure. Greenskins are really going to have to put some pressure on the rest of the Wood Elf army, try and use their superior numbers and mobility, because right now they just have a bunch of units all kind of condensed here on this far flank. They really need to start kind of winding around, trying to get in the back, put those pressures onto the Glade Riders. They have the numbers, and they can quickly kind of push in once those guys are gone, or at least occupied. They can start trying to shut down those Way Watchers. But right now, the Wood Elves are going to be able to play their game with the pressure that the Greenskins are putting on them. They can just kind of slowly fall back bit by bit and get those volleys off where they need to. And it looks like we are going to be getting, looks like Fist of Gork here, getting some melee attack. That may have been a little bit of a misclick. I think maybe expecting to go into these Glade Riders, but it's going to be a little bit wasted Winds of Magic. Kind of surprised to see that there. I think it may have been just a little too gung-ho trying to go forward, but these Glade Riders are taking quite a bit of damage just from the skirmish cattle, these Force Common Spider Riders. They're just slowly melting bit by bit, taking damage, and definitely going to be losing a bit of their usefulness here in the late game. But in the meantime, just seeing those volleys just ring true to their name, as they are just going to be doing a ton of damage to the Zork Boys, taking them down to half health. Stone Trolls are going to be pushing forward. Now, they are a little bit isolated, but they are going to be able to get a few hits off onto like these Hawkeyes or Takira, now I think would be a really good time for that smoke bomb, get these Eternal Guard in, and then these guys can turn and fire and really do a bunch of damage. But a nice pendulum, going to arc through, go kill those orc boys, and that should be able to get them routing, and indeed it does. And here is a really vicious kind of surround. These stone trolls definitely got a little bit too far ahead, not really taking a whole lot of damage, still have all of their models, but they are going to be breaking really quickly, and with nothing that's super close by, this entire flank here is really kind of the Wood Elves domain. These Glade Riders are going to be able to have a better time trying to escort these guys out, but luckily for the Greenskins, those stone trolls seem to want to go to the rest of their army, and the rest of the infantry is doing rather well, able to break down those Dryads, and this Branch Wraith right now is kind of surrounded by Orc Boys. The Grom the Paunch here could definitely swing around and deal with her there. Looks like we are going to be getting a little bit extra. Another Fist of Gore trying to get a little bit extra melee attack, melee defense, try and push back these Glade Riders, which is the only thing really holding in that section of the map, as Grom the Paunch doing a good job kind of pushing forward, as now the Greenskins really are putting that pressure on the Wood Elves, and they are really peeling things off bit by bit. But of course the Greenskins are suffering casualties to boot, as well as more and more of their units are starting to and there goes the wall going to be giving these guys a nice buff, just as these stone trolls can be diving right on into these Way Watchers, really tanking that damage very well with their high armor and their missile resist to boot. Plaguelord trying to break these Forest Scum Spiders and is able to do that, at least freeing up a bit more, but there is always more Skirmish Cav to come and try and harass these Way Watchers with Prey, and Rema is going to go down instead, keeping these Morgoth's Mangy Marauders at bay, and they're going to be taking a couple of volleys from those Way Watchers at point blank range as they continue to try and put distance between them and the rest of the Greenskin forces. Mouthwar is in the favor of the Wood Elves, but right now it is really everyone's game so far, as the Way Watchers really are separated from the bulk of the Wood Elf army, as the Wood Elves kind of stuck chasing from behind, as these stone trolls and Grom the Paunch are able to kind of put a little bit of pressure onto these Way Watchers, but those shots coming in, especially with those Hawkeyes that are here, able to drop a model, and that discouraged effect is going to be making its presence known against those stone trolls, making their leadership drop down to the point where they do end up routing, and those Glade Riders should be able to do a nice bit of job of escorting them at least a good portion of the way, and kind of seeing how things not going all too well for Wenin is going to be conceding. Wasn't quite at a loss just yet. I think Grom the Paunch was still sitting rather healthy, but like those stone trolls, I think were kind of the biggest issue there, is they were both being escorted off by those Glade Riders with spears, and they're just making sure that there wasn't really going to be anything coming to save them. I'm just kind of taking a look at kind of what was even left for the Greenskins mobility. They did bring quite a bit, but a lot of it did take quite a bit of damage. So let's kind of go over the values real quick here before things progress to the next one. We'll also update that scorecard because Killing Smalls will be taking game 1, putting him up 1-0 going into game 2. And for the rest of the Greenskins army, Skirmish Cav not really doing all too great. Kind of the Cav as well kind of got a little shot up on that approach. I think they definitely needed to kind of use their superior numbers, because I mean, taking a look at how many they had it looks like 9 total mobile forces with some nice good speed, and if you add Grom to that, they had 10 units who had a good amount of speed to kind of get around just the 4 units of Glade Riders. Definitely could have been going in 2-1 on most of those units, putting a lot more pressure than they ended up doing. Stone Trolls getting some value, but nothing too great, and a lot of the infantry did get shot up pretty badly on the approach. As for the Wood Elves, the rest of like the Dryads, like nothing too impressive there. Even the Wraiths of Frozen Heart only getting 400, but it is those Way Watchers, which they can always produce some fantastic results. These guys getting 1262, we get 651, and then 866. So not as great there. That only the one Way Watcher really generating a ton of value. But the Glade Rider is definitely performing a bit better than the mobile forces of the Greenskins counterpart. But that is it for game 1. Let's get right on into game 2. Foul vermin skitter about, and Volkmar the Grim is here to put an end to that in this Game 2 matchup between the Empire and the Skaven, with Killing Smalls will be commanding the Empire, and Wenin will be on the Skaven side. So for the Empire army, it is going to be a very wide front line, lots of spearmen. We do have some swordsmen mixed into that, some flagellant on the 2 far flanks. We do have a couple of great cannons as well, provide some nice range support, and of course Volkmar the Grim himself with his Grand Stonefire Bombardment, Grand Shield of Faith, Grand Hammer of Sigmar, and his Bound Banishment. Off on the far flanks, we are going to be seeing a couple of Empire Knights both pointing their noses towards the corner, and they are are going to be sniffing out their first prey of the day. Some wolf rats have been vanguarded on to that far corner. These guys also taking a look into that corner, seeing if there's any sneaky vanguard shenanigans on that side, but nothing in the direct rear of the Empire. We do have a couple more Pistoliers to provide a little bit of skirmish on the approach of the Skaven. And then for the spellcasting, we do have a mage flying about in the sky. We have a Amethyst Wizard going to be coming in just with Spirit Leech, trying to kind of melt down those weapons teams bit by bit, get some nice decent volleys in with that spell. Now, for the Skaven, we already have seen that wolf rat, which is probably doomed to be pushed right off the map so early on. With the rest of the army, we do have some clan rats, Skaven slaves for that front line, just going to be kind of spread across that low ground. And we do have some poison wind globadiers as well. We're going to be adding some support and really trying to melt those Empire troops as quickly as possible. And we also do have a Plague Claw catapult, going to be slinging some shots in down range. Now, of course, this Plague Claw is going to be a little outnumbered, though it does have that contaminated, which gives that -10 leadership on its shots when it does land its mark. And for some of the mobility, we do have a couple rat ogres for some mass and additional stuff, really trying to kind of pin in Volkmar here. We do have Natty Booby sharpshooters getting some nice long shots in with their snipe and unspottable, so they're going to be, or with their snipe I should say, and getting some shots in while they remain unspotted. Now the heroes and lords, we are going to be seeing a Grey Seer apply, going to be running amok with the Poison Wind Globadiers. And for that Grey Seer, going to be keeping a low profile here, is going to be bringing Vermintide, Pestilent Breath, as well as the Dreaded 13th, looking to kind of really nuke down some units with that. We do also have a couple of Chieftains as well, going to be rolling on in. Both of these guys are also going to be just on foot, kind of a little interesting sight to be seen. What they do have bonus versus large and armor piercing, so against units kind of like Volkmar to an extent, but they are still rather large or small targets, so that they will kind of suffer a bit from that. And then we also did see one more unit, which is going to be the Ishka's Triads. The Eshin Triads ROR, and they do have some nice little mirage abilities, kind of get things shooting at things that aren't even there. But let's get things rolling. We take a little peek over onto the far flank. As we can see on the map, these wolf rats trying to find their way out of their little tough spot. But these Empire Knights are going to be kind of on top of things, able to at least get engaged with those wolf rats before they were able to kind of sneak on out, while the other one is going to be returning to the rest of the battle, leaving just that one wolf rat to be dealt with by the Empire Knight. Natty Booby sharpshooters are going to start opening up their shots, going to be firing some shots long down range, down the hill, trying to pick off some of these Pistoliers. And it does look like that Great Cannon has taken a bit of damage already from that Plague Claw catapult. Already you can just see how low that leadership got just off of a single volley, and that is going to be where the Plague Claw really kind of comes into play. It is not necessarily meant, or it is not meant to break these Great Cannons in terms of their models, but is intended to designed to break the crew themselves, and is going to be doing a decent job at that, while Volkmar pushing forward, getting a Soulfire bombardment in, getting maybe a little too ahead of himself. Those rat ogres do pose a bit of a threat to him with their armor piercing and their mass to boot as well, but the cannons are singing and they are firing away at that Plague Claw catapult, getting some decent damage in, dropping one model already, dropping a second one, so now it's just down to one of the Plague Claws. Bringing a couple of the Plague Claws may have been a little bit more of a benefit, because that would have maybe allowed them to trade better into those great cannons, but bringing the one, it is going to fall victim to the artillery barrage of these two great cannons in due time. That is going to free things up for the Empire. It is going to completely force the Skaven forces to push forward. They are not going to be able to sit back and relax. They are going to have to put a bit of pressure, and down goes the third. So away is that long range, but we still have that Amethyst Wizard is sitting very close and is going to keep these Natty Boo Boo sharpshooters spotted, and dropping Spirit Leech after Spirit Leech, dropping these models one at a time, so already down to 11, and falling might get down to 9 after that Spirit Leech, and that is a lot of value being lost very quickly on. So far being very well played by Killing Smalls, able to really deal with those long ranged threats, and now just has to deal with the infantry fight. Now these Poison Globadiers, though, are going to have the number of the Empire State troops. Volkmar is going to have to carry his weight and get some good damage in, but both of these chieftains coming on in, trying to deal some damage to Volkmar, but Volkmar has all his stuff popped. Grand Shield Faith and Grand Himber Sigmar are both being popped, and that Banishment going right down on top of the Poison Globadiers, doing some nice bit of damage there. That looks like we do have some vermin spells being slung one way at a time, and we do have that the dreaded 13th, but it's just being cast right in kind of the center here. Those are the kind of spells you want to drop right on top of the Great Cannons if you can, because it'll pretty much instantly cause those guys to rout right off the bat. Empire Knights getting some nice rear charges into the Poison Globadiers, but they are taking a few shots in the rear by these enemy sharpshooters, and the Amethyst Wizard is going to be diving down now that the Ishka's Triads have kind of pushed forward to deal with those Empire Knights, and they are going to be getting a very nice rear charge into them. It looks like their attention's almost bent elsewhere, but they are going to be getting some very nice damage into these Empire Knights, and get a scorch going as well down onto those flatulence, getting some decent amount of damage. But these guys are going to just keep pushing forward quicker and quicker, trying to get into those Poison Wind Globadiers, shut them down the can, and a very nice summon going to be dropped right on top of these Empire Knights, going to be kind of pushing them back, freeing up that chieftain. But all of the state troops for the Empire, as you can just see, there is not really a front line left anymore. These Skaven have done an excellent job of breaking through and dealing with all the spearmen. The only thing left that is really still fighting is the far flanks, and those flagellants are the only thing really holding things back from the Great Cannon, who still have a ton of ammunition to be spending. These Great Cannons are getting very low. They're not even on their artillery piece anymore, and they do end up routing all the same. And now Volkmar is getting a little bit in a tough spot as he's being surrounded by these rat ogres. Their mass is enough to keep him in. Chieftain coming in to provide a little bit of extra damage, and that's where that bonus versus large armor piercing is going to start whittling down Volkmar bit by bit, and he's going to be trying to pull out, get into some of his own support. Pistoliers would be a very nice welcome help, trying to wear down those chasing units of Volkmar himself, while these Empire Knights are doing a decent job, able to get a little bit of damage in, but they themselves are probably going to be in a little bit of a rougher position, especially if these rat ogres do decide to fully commit to this fight. But they are, at least for the time being, shutting down those Poison Wind Globadiers. On the other flank, Poison Wind going to be getting a nice volley into these Empire Knights on the charge, going to be dropping a few models, and they probably won't be lasting very long. They do get the charge off, but those Empire Knights, suffering from that Poison Wind, are going to be routing themselves and will probably be taking a volley on the retreat, and that should seal their fate completely, as they'll most likely be shattering off of that. We do have the Great Cannon crew coming back onto their model and are going to be able to get those cannons singing once again, as is the other artillery piece looking to get back on its own artillery models, but it does have a little ways to go to get back into the fight and start getting some nice, more decent damage. But for the meantime, Volkmar is going to be pretty much standing alone. He does have his Amethyst Wizard up in the sky to support, but he's going to be just pretty much spells. He does get all of these units nice and grouped up, and it looks like he was trying to drop a spell there. I think is going to be his Bound Banishment. Going to be trying to get that off, getting as much damage as he can to these rat ogres with him at its epicenter. Going to be getting some nice damage. Hopefully he's going to be able to freeze some shots. We see that Great Cannon is starting to sing. Might be doing a bit of friendly fire to Volkmar, and I don't think Volkmar is going to be able to survive this anyway. He's just taking way too much damage to sustain off the heel, trying to pull out, but those chieftains are going to be able to bring him down, and now that chariot is going to lie vacant for the rest of the fight, and the Skaven definitely taking advantage in the battle at this point. Artillery crew is running for their artillery crews. The other one is pretty much the only thing really left with its guns still alive and well, and at this point there's just way too many Skaven left. I mean, just the slaves, all of that. The Poison Wind Globadiers can easily deal with the flagellants. I mean, they have the Ishka's Triads, these Clan Rat Spears. They'll be able to whittle these flagellants down, no problem at all. And the chieftains are probably going to be able to deal with anything else. Amethyst Wizard themselves does end up routing, and the Grey Seer is still sitting alive, as these Clan Rat summons trying to make their way to the Great Cannon are going to reach the end of their summons just as they got up to their final approach. But there is still plenty of unit stuff that can put some pressure onto this Great Cannon crew. I just don't see any good way for the Empire to come back. They just have very little things. All of it they have is on the outside of the map here. They do have some Pistoliers. Getting some volleys in the Poison Wind Globadiers might be enough to get at least this one unit off, but both of them suffer from that volley on that far side of the map, and they are going to be taking quite a bit of damage on that front. Ishka's Triad's going to be roaming free, have nothing really left to fear against these Empire State troops. They should be able to handle anything and everything that they go up against, as that the Amethyst Wizard is going to be diving amongst the Poison Wind Globadiers, just trying to get some damage in. But these Rat Ogres are right here to lend their aid. barricade as the Rat Ogres themselves getting rather low. A volley from those Pistoliers is able to rout them off, freeing up that Amethyst Wizard just a bit as those Pistoliers dive into the Plague Claw Catapults, who have long since lost their purpose in this match other than just being some chaff. Spearmen trying to kind of at least put a little bit of pressure on to the Gracier, but these Spearmen in the back are able to get onto those Great Cannons, and they will be shutting them down, I'm pretty sure, for good at this point, and with them routing, might even just end up shattering at this point, especially with the damage taken. But yeah, there's just not a whole lot of hope left in the Empire. Definitely looking like we're going to be seeing Game 3 on the horizon. Gracier is still at full health, probably a few more summons. I think we've only seen one of the dreaded 13th yet this match, and I mean, one at this point might be able to just outright push army losses completely in their favor. But instead, going to be getting some more Clan Rat summons, just getting more bodies onto the fight. Just trying to push it back, like all the Pistoliers and the like, who are escorting the Chieftain off the field at this point. But there is still going to be one more Chieftain, a full health Gracier, and plenty of Rat Ogres. Ishka's Triads are probably one of the bigger concerns, considering the Pistoliers are pretty much all out of ammunition. Anything that tries to deal with those Ishka's Triads really aren't going to be having much of a good time at all, and these Flagellants just down to 4 models left, and dropping that is actually going to be army losses. The only thing left is the Flagellants. It looks like we are going to be seeing Game 3 as Wenin takes control of this fight, evening up the series 1-1. And the only thing left is a few pesky Flagellants fighting down to the bitter last man. 3 units left, and it is only a matter of time. Just 1 remaining, and down they shall fall. And with that, the last of the hopes for the Empire this day. So let's look at the after battle report to even out the scorecard as well, as it's now 1-1. And take a look at how things did fare on the uptake. So we have the Gracier getting 323, both of the Chieftains doing some decent damage, 800 and 700 between them. Rest of the units, Clan Rats, doing some okay work, with the Poison Wind Globadiers getting a nice juicy amount of damage, 1364 and 883. And the Rat Ogres as well doing some decent work, with the Pit Fighters of Hell's Steep getting over 1,000 in total value, some good mass armor piercing, all that good stuff there. Plague Cloud Catapults actually still got some decent damage, 466, despite being pretty much deleted from the game very early on. And the Nanbu Sharpshooters also got pretty much handled on the onset of that fight by the Amethyst Wizard. Rest of the units, Ishka Triads doing all right, but really it was kind of a even spread, except for these 2 Poison Wind Globadiers, who really broke that front line very quickly. So for the Empire forces, both of the Great Cans, or one of the Great Cans I should say, got 1388, the other one not so great, only 209. Pistoliers doing some decent damage, and then the Empire Knights got some okay damage, but nothing too ridiculous. And then the rest of the state troops really did not hold all too greatly. Amethyst Wizard getting 1731, a ton of value, more so than even Volkmar the Grim, 1245 on that. But just the Skaven just sending bodies after bodies, summons after summons. It was just a little too much for those Empire forces to handle, and Wenin will force Game 3. So let's get right on into the rubber match. Marathian Company descend upon the Beastmen for this Game 3 matchup. We will have Killing Smalls on the Dark Elves, and Wenin will be on the Beastmen. So for the Dark Elf army, it is going to be triple Scourge Runner Chariots going to be pushing on forward, and we are going to have Marathi and double Feral Manticore up in the sky with that aerial goon squad. Marathi is going to be bringing her standard stuff with the Wand of Kraton, the Soul Stealer, Heartrender, and the Dark Sword, and Enchanting Beauty. We also do have the Raven's Herald, the Repeater Crossbows ROR, also going to be up in the sky, going to be firing in those armor-piercing shots from up on high, and hopefully trying to avoid any of the Beastmen shots going their way. We do have a couple of K-Knight Assassins as well, going to be on the ground, going to be helping to support that infantry, and they also do have that Web of Shadows, which can kind of whittle down any of those Beastmen infantry that get a little too close. We do have for infantry just Dread Spears all the way across that ring, with a couple of Bleak Swords in the back, sealing things up on that front. But most of the stopping power is the Scourge Runners and that Marathi Feral Manticore. So for the Beastmen side of things, though, they do have plenty of mobility. Seeing what they've got, they got a couple of Centaurs, a couple of Razorgore herds as well on that far flank, and some Centaurs with throwing axes kind of off on this right flank here with a little bit more Centaur support. So it's just going to be mobility for days with those Centaurs, and we're going to be having some Gore herds and some of those Ungor Spearman herds for the infantry. But mostly it is going to be that mobile game. It's just going to be trying to get onto those Scourge Runners, but they don't have that many range units. They just have these 3 Centaurs with throwing axes. So the air squad going to be a little bit more safe with only those units to be worrying about. And then for the Lords and Heroes, it is going to be Torox, the Brass Bull. He is going to be bringing the Brass Body as well as Slaughterer's Call and Blood Greed. For the spellcasting, it is going to be a Bray Shaman of Wild. Bray Shaman of Wild is going to be bringing Traderkin and Devolve, kind of trying to slow things down just a little bit and allowing the Beastmen to catch those Scourge Runner chariots with that speed reduction. But for the most part, that is going to be what we've got. So let's get things moving, as the Dark Elves, I think, are going to be wanting to play a little bit more cautiously and definitely prepared to kind of push forward with these Scourge Runner chariots. But just with the massive mobility that the Beastmen have, I don't think that they're going to be wanting to try and do too much of that, because they definitely want to be getting in, trying to get some shots at Centaurs. The Bray Shaman and Torox would be some very nice targets for them to be shooting at, but they do have to be very mindful, because the Centaurs, they do have a considerable amount of speed, and with that Devolve on them, they can definitely find themselves caught in a very bad spot and are going to be retreating instead towards the center pocket of the Dark Elf formation, while the Beastmen are going to be able to get more and more of a surround off, as they are just going to be extending their fingers around this Dark Elf formation, looking to collapse upon it on all sides and do a nice bit of damage there. The infantry is going to be getting a little close to these Dread Spears. I think maybe getting in a little too early, but if they do have the support from these Razor Cores, they might be able to get some nice, decent work done against these Dread Spears. But the backline is going to be starting to collapse. Centaurs, throwing axes, all those good stuff going to be coming in on the back, putting that pressure on the top of the hill, while Marathi, all these Manticores, going to be flying around, giving a little bit of support on the front line, trying to break these Gore herds as quickly as they can. And these Razor Gore herds going to be finding a little bit of a hole in the meantime, going to be pushing forward, that they do get that Web of Shadows popped off, it looks like, or that is actually a Traderkin going the other way, doing some decent damage to this front line, as now the Beastmen, they are collapsing on all fronts right now. Razor Gore herds just trying to break these Bleak Swords, get in, cause as much havoc as they can, and they are going to be shutting down these Bleak Sword, or the Scourge Runners, fairly decently. But we are going to be getting a Spirit Leech, or a Soul Stealer, Soul Stealer down on all the units that tried to put that pressure down. We get Devolve and all sorts of good stuff going down across the board. Definitely probably trying to hit those Scourge Runners, hits those Bleak Swords instead. But just as the Beastmen did get that collapse in, Marathi had a thing or two to say about that, as we do have that Murderous Prowess going off already, as Raven's Herald can be getting some decent shots in from up on high. Both of the Manticores still sitting very, very healthy, though the Assassin's taken a bit of damage, and the once nice and compact Dark Elf formation is anything but at this point, as they're being pulled to pieces right now, as the mobility of the Beastmen definitely playing to their strong suit here, as they are just collapsing on all fronts, getting the collapses across the board. Dread Spears, Bleak Swords, all of the like are just breaking under the pressure as quickly as possible. Torox is having the time of his life as well, as he does, but he does take a Wanted Kraton straight to the face. Marathi going to be diving on down, and it looks like the Feral Manticore also going to be trying to get in onto this action, as they're going to be trying to eliminate Torox now if they can. Looks like we're going to be getting, it looks like another Soul Stealer, and it's going to be hitting a bunch of targets here. That hits Centaurs, Razor Gores, Torox. It hits these the Gore Herd and the Ungor Spearmen, so a lot of damage going to be dealt there. But now all of the Beastmen, they all come for blood. Seeing that Marathi has used her Soul Stealer, they just collapse upon the Dark Elf formation, and every Centaur that the Beastmen can muster is here and now. Balance power is in their favor, as they have collapsed, dealt with one of the Feral Manticores, and they are just doing a bunch of damage. We do see some shots coming in from the I believe is the Raven's Herald up in the sky, as well as the Scourge Runners, who have been able to maintain a bit of... They have lost a few models, but they've used up a decent amount of ammunition. But that was a vicious collapse by the Beastmen, and we are going to be getting, it looks like a Traderkin going to be hitting Marathi and these Dread Spears, doing a bit of damage there as the Centaurs trying to bring her down, collapse upon her, and do as much as she can. Shots are still raining down from those Raven's Heralds from up on high, but Marathi is in a bit of a tough spot. We do also have a bunch of these Centaurs with throwing axes sitting really close by and are seemingly unable to get a shot, and this is going to be another vicious Soul Stealer, as that is going to be hitting all of these Centaurs with throwing axes. These Centaurs, both of these units of Razorgors and Centaurs, so a ton of damage is being dealt by Marathi so far, and the Beastmen are just suffering painfully in that regard, but still they have a very strong grasp on that balance of power right now. They still have plenty of mobility left across the board as these Centaurs are pushing pressure onto these Scourge Runner chariots, who have pretty much used all their ammunition, so they have been able to generate some very decent value themselves, able to push things off. These Raven's Heralds are still have a few shots themselves, but in the center ranks, the Beastmen still have a very strong grasp. They have a bunch of units left, but we are going to be getting the second Wand of Kraton, going to be trying to hit Torok's Crest Bull, as he's going to be trying to keep his butt moving, as he does, able to dodge that shot, because that almost surely would have put him in the ground had that landed, but a moving target is very hard to hit with that ability, and Marathi still stuck on the ground, surrounded by Centaurs. These Centaurs definitely need to finish this collapse and try and deal with her. She is getting so very low. Her leadership is on the edges of breaking, and Marathi goes. That is pretty much going to be curtains for the Dark Elves. The Manicore trying to come to aid. We do get a Web of Shadows in the nick of time for this K-Knight Assassin, trying to deal with what is trying to surround the Dark Elf leadership, and Torok's Crest Bull is getting very low, and he does end up routing himself, which is going to be able to alleviate some of the pressure from the Dark Elves, and these Scourge Runners definitely have that mobility to try and kind of chase things down, as he's getting very low, and Marathi, Manicore, and company still alive, able to survive that onslaught. Things were getting very dicey for Marathi. She was just on slivers of leadership at one point, and that balance power is shifting bit by bit closer and closer towards the center, as Marathi just trying to drag things out, staying on the ground at this point, but that is going to allow her to kind of avoid those Centaurs with throwing axes fire, but she is kind of stuck between these Centaurs now on the ground. But she does have the Scourge Runners, the K-Knight Assassin here to support. More Centaurs though are dropping in, and we get another Soul Stealer going to be trying to heal her up more and more, and hits two very healthy Centaurs with throwing axes, who in turn are now going to collapse as well. And we're seeing, but some more units are returning. The K-Knight Assassin with plenty of ammunition left to get some shots in, but Marathi is now surrounded by units. Manicore dives on down, trying to get a late stage terror route. That Manicore with that terror is going to be instrumental, and there it is right there. Both of those units, terror route, shatter, and that is going to be all she wrote, as the Dark Elves pull it out. Things were looking very grim for them, and Killing Smalls will take the victory here. So let's update that scorecard, and then we'll go over the armies, because man, that was a nail biter to the very end. Beastmen looked so very strong. That collapse was a thing of beauty at one point, but Marathi, just the value that she got, 2420. Both of the K-Knight Assassins, one got almost 1,000, the other only 300, but the Dark Elves doing a very nice work. All of the infantry, I just don't expect a whole lot from them. They broke so very quickly. One got 600, Raven's Heralds got 861, and then the Scourge Runners, though, they did very well. Two units getting about almost identical in terms of value, 1142, 1144, 445 on them, and then both of the Feral Manicores doing some decent work, but really having that terror there in that late game was very good, because they were able to terror route and then end up full routing two units of fairly decent health Centaurs with throwing axes at the end, and everything was just on slivers of HP, with the exception of those two Scourge Runners, which were sitting all right in terms of health. As for the Beastman side of things, Torox and the Bray Shaman, nothing too great there. It really was the mobile game, which the Beastmen brought so strongly in this fight, as the Centaurs generating some nice value, 977 on them, 628. All of the throwing axes, 1124, 997, so some very good value across the board, and even these Razorgors getting 790. So a very fun match, very close till the very end, but Killing Smalls is able to take the series 2-1, and another victory up onto the tally. But with that, we are going to close things out. I do hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good one.